Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Early on in his work on moral virtue, Plutarch is going to provide us with, you can call it a definition of moral or ethical virtue, or a characterization, whatever term you want to use. He's telling us here that he's speaking in outline, hos tupo epen in his Greek. So he's giving us something that we will have to fill in with more detail later. And he's going to begin this section in chapter 4 by saying that what's translated here as ethical or moral virtue, but the term is actually ethos. So you could also use the term character, if you like, which is a little bit more global, but character includes the moral virtues. Also, if you're a bad person, the moral vices that you have. And I do want to say something before we go deep into this. If you allow yourself to get hung up on the distinction between the terms ethical and moral, that's not going to work with Plutarch. Why? Because ethical and moral both mean the same thing in ancient times. There is no distinction like you might find in certain textbooks or in presentations where ethical means one thing and moral means another, which, by the way, there's no consistency on in philosophy or ethics more specifically. In ancient times, ethical virtue comes from the word ethos, which means character, and ethos, which means habit. In ancient times, moral is a Latin term that comes from mores, which means habit. Moralia and, ethike, same thing, two different languages. So that said, getting that out of the way, he's going to say that ethical or moral virtue is well named or rightly called. Why? Because it is, as he's going to say, it's a quality, a poietes, a way of being of a certain part of our soul, the irrational, the allogon part of our soul. But it's formed by, and the Greek word there, I wanted to highlight it, plachomenon. It's formed by, or literally shaped by, reason. Now, this is actually the word that we, in a certain derivation, get the word plastic from. Originally, plastic means shapeable, and we came to use that for a certain substance, which could be, molded into all sorts of shape. So think of the irrational part as being molded into certain shapes by reason. And how does reason actually do this? Well, it has the irrational part take on this distinct quality, the quality that differentiates it from other things, by introducing habit. And it could be multiple habits. We could think of a habit as a complex of different habits. Ethe, so in the dative, through habit, by means of habit. Habituation, we could also say as well. And then here he's going to say something very interesting that shows you the difference between a Middle Platonist like Plutarch or the Aristotelians and one of their main sets of rivals, the Stoics, So he tells us that reason does not wish to or aim at, it doesn't shoot for, we might say, eliminating passion, emotions altogether. And he says you couldn't do this to begin with, and even if you could, it wouldn't be a good thing to do, but rather to do something else, to impose on the emotions a kind of limitation. And here he uses the word horos, which also means definition. You could say to have your sadness be the right kind of sadness, limited, stuck within a shape that's properly formed. Your joy should also be in a certain sense as well. It shouldn't just be this sloppy thing that's all over the place. Same thing with your desires. So limitation and order, taxing. This is a term that's got a wide range. Everything from arranging institutions within a city or arranging troops on a battlefield to setting a table to ordering the parts of yourself inside. And he says to implant within the irrational part the ethical virtues. And here he actually does use the word aretes, right? Virtues, aretai, and ethikai. So the character virtues, the moral virtues. That's what reason does instead of eliminating passion. And so he's going to say, what we're aiming for here is not an absence of passion, a apatheia, but rather due proportion, symmetrias. This is the word that we get symmetry from, right? It means to arrange things properly. So you can grieve, but grieve in the right way, right? You can be angry, but be angry in proportion to things. And measure, mesotetas, right? Imposing these on the passion or drive or emotion. And this is really characteristic of Plutarch's position, the Platonist position, and even the later Aristotelian one. And he's going to say, how does this actually work? Well, reason implants these things, due proportion and measure, by using prudence, phronesis in Greek, to develop what he's going to call a capacity, a dunamis, for passion, for feeling things, into what he calls an acquired state. And here he gives you a little bit of an aside about our psychological faculties. So he's going to say these three things the soul is said to possess, and this is actually coming from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Plutarch is perfectly fine with taking things from Aristotle and incorporating them into a Platonic matrix. So the soul contains capacities for things, dunames, and he gives you examples of these, right? Capacity is a starting point, he says, or raw material like irascibility, being able to get angry, bashfulness or shamefulness, modesty, temerity. And then from that capacity that we all have, we feel the actual emotion, the feeling, the passion. So there we could actually have anger, shame, boldness, right? And then finally, beyond that, we don't just have emotions. We have what you're translating here as acquired state. Sometimes it's also translated as disposition or habit as well. A hexis. This can be a virtue or a vice in Aristotelian or Platonic moral psychology. So the acquired state would be something, like he says, a settled force and a condition of the capacity of the irrational. So with anger, it could be a vice, like being a hothead. It could also be mildness or gentleness, prautes in Greek. That's a quality. That's an acquired state. The person who is gentle or mild or good-tempered will, in fact, have the capacity to get angry, will probably feel anger, but it goes into this matrix of an acquired state. And he's going to tell us, how does this acquired state actually develop? Well, out of, and here's another word for habit, ex ethos, right? Out of habit. So habituation, we could say. We do the same thing consistently, and we eventually become less angry or more angry. We become, more bold or less bold. We become, more shameful, modest, or we become shameless or, maybe a little bit too prudish. And so we're going to conclude here by bringing all of this together. He says, okay, so if a passion, a feeling, an emotion, is educated, and that's the word that he uses here, paidagogete. So this, paideia is education, because it comes from the word for child, pais, and agoge, to lead, to drive. When you're leading the child, in this case, the emotion, in a certain way, consistently. If you're doing it well, kalos, by reason, well, you wind up with a virtue. You wind up with the kind of moral virtue that we're interested in. However, if you do it badly, phalos, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, if you're being sloppy, careless, getting bad information, reasoning poorly, well, then what you end up with instead is a vice. And a vice is just as much an acquired state, a settled quality, as is a virtue. That's part of why vices are so problematic. It takes a while to develop a virtue, but once you've got it, it's stable. Well, bad news is it's the same way for vice. So what we get here is a really great characterization of what Plutarch takes a moral or ethical virtue to be and how we develop it within ourselves.